So a few days ago, I was speaking to my mom on the phone, and before the end of the conversation, she decided to throw in, not she decided, but she unconsciously threw in this proverb in our dialect. She said, "If was obe marofia." So this is our dialect, but in Ibizube, generally, Igbo will say, "If uzo bo imara ohia." So literally meaning getting lost on the road teaches you about the forest. So when my mom said this, she didn't explain it. In fact, she didn't have to explain it because where I come from, proverbs don't interrupt conversation. As a matter of fact, they are the conversation. So, and as opposed to many people's thinking, people think that proverbs are exclusive to elders in African communities. But that's not how African communities work. Proverbs are woven into the fabric of our existence. They shape how we advise people, how we persuade, how we comfort, how we caution, even how we settle disputes and disagreements. As Chinua Achebe said in Things Fall Apart, he said that proverbs are palm oil with which words are eaten. As a matter of fact, there is no better definition to a proverb because I have always been fascinated by that definition. And another thing is that proverbs don't merely decorate our speech, they deepen our speech. So rather than making or stretching an explanation, we often reach out for proverb just to say what we would have said ordinarily in a long sentence, right? So proverbs appear also in our songs, right? We find it in our folktales, in public speeches, and everyday conversation, and even in moments of silence when one proverb can say enough. Before I go any further, I would want to welcome you in my own cultural fashion. Na mmalite n'ozi ekele, ekele m onye ukwu, ekele m onye nta, ekele m ezi, ekele m ụlọ, kele ezinụlọ, ekele m ikwu, ekele m ibe, kele ikwu na ibe, ekele m ọha, ekele m eze, kelekwa ọha na eze. Ndị mụrụ nwa, asị m ha rie uru nwa ha mụrụ. Ndị ga-aga ahịa, asị m ha rie uru ahịa. Ndị ga-aga mba, asị m ha zụta nke ọma. Ndị ga-aga ubi, asị m ha kụta mkpụrụ ọma. Egbe, ugo, atụpịa na nwanza, otu ukwu osisi, otu eluigwe ọcha. Nke si ibe ebela, asị m ka nke ukwaa ya. Ada ka hapụrụ amadi mbazu ji ya. Azụ tọrọ nne nne ụtọ n'ofe ọkwụrụ ya. Asị m ogbu nkwụ na nkwụ ya. Ọkụ ngwọ na ngwọ ya. Ogbu ọja na ọja ya. Ọkpụ ụbọ na ụbọ ya. Ode akwụkwọ na mkpịsị ya. Omeiwu na iwu ya. Okpe ikpe na ikpe ya. Ọzụ ahịa na ahịa ya. Onye nkụzi na ụmụ akwụkwọ ya. Dibịa na-akpọ ọgụ ya. Mmụọ egbula anyị, mmadụ egbukwala n'anyị. Mana onye si anya agafe n'ama, asị m ya n'ụzọ gbaa mgba. Ndị nwe m, asị m ndụ mmiri ndụ azụ. Mmiri atala ma azụ anwụla. Kama ha ga-eri anyị, asị m ka anyị ise n'elu mmiri. Ndị Igbo si, ihe ju akpa machie ya ọnụ. Ekwekwuo ama agba. Eme echeta, eme echeta. Ụkwara oge ya, ya ọda. Ọja dufuo dike, dike baa ala. Ọja abaa akpa. Akụfecha, ya ọdara nwa awọ. Nwata bulie nna ya enu. Ngwongwo na ngwongwo awachienu ya anya. Ndị be anyị sị na nka dị na ntị. Ọ bụ eziokwu, mana ka m chetara gị na ihe ọbụla ọ sọrọ gị mere nwenye gị nwaanyị, ọ ga-akpọ gị nna, n'ihi na ihe mere nwata nọ ya n'obi. Ndị be anyị tụrụ ilu si ebe nwata na-ebe akwa na-atụ aka ma nne ya nọghị ya, nna ya nọrọ ya. N'ihi na ụtara na-ada n'ala gbara aka aja. Na nke ikpete maazụ a, nkịta gwara onye a tụrụ ahịa ute na ya wetara ego ya na ịdị n'ala amaala ya ahụ. Ọsọ mgbada nọ n'ugwu. Ọ bụ otu aka ọha m n'ọnụ. N'ụbọchị nta ka anyị chụọ ọnụ n'Owere nchi. Let's go back. Now, a few years ago at Duke University, I witnessed how profound or how powerful a proverb can be. So I was speaking with a professor who had become deeply frustrated by a graduate student she had hired as a teaching assistant, right? So according to the professor, the student had become verbally disrespectful and increasingly difficult to work with. Eventually, the professor dismissed the student from the position. But then that wasn't the end of it. The student continued sending threatening emails, for which eventually forced the professor to, report him to both the department and other university authorities. Naturally, she worried about what this student might do next. So after listening to her, because she confided in me, I said, Prof, a rat makes just of a cat when it is assured of a nearby hole. She immediately replied yes, but I could tell that she hadn't given the proverb a deep thought or much thought. So I remained silent. A few seconds later, she paused. Then she smiled. At this point, the proverb had finally landed. So, as our conversation continued, I wanted to reassure her that she had made the right decision, not only for herself, but also for her student and as well the course by, dismissing the student. So by doing this, I added another proverb. I said to her, our people always say that a single bracelet does not jingle. At this time, she laughed. She went, "Oh, Carlo, you Africans and your proverbs, right?" So, and again, I jokingly apologized to her that I can't help it. But then that moment reminded me of something important, that proverbs are not simply beautiful expressions, they become part of a people's identity. They shape how we think, how we remember, and how we communicate as Africans. Again, once you begin reading African literature, or especially 20th century, you notice something almost immediately. Proverbs everywhere. From novels to plays, from poetry to essays, African writers consistently weaved proverbs into the speech of their characters. And when I think about proverbs in African literature, one writer that comes to mind is Chinua Achebe. Now, I should make one thing clear, that there is no single author or ownership of African proverbs. They belong to the communities. They belong to not only the communities, they belong to generations, from one generation to the other, right? So they belong to a collective wisdom of different African peoples. So I would like to say that despite Achebe did not invent proverbs, or the proverbs we encounter in his novels, right? We could still give him the credit for popularizing them by translating them from its indigenous languages into English language. In this way, it is made accessible to readers around the world while preserving much of their cultural richness. I believe that is one of the most significant achievements that Achebe made in literary milieu. But here is something I've learned over the years also about proverbs, that knowing a few proverbs is one thing, knowing when to use them and how to use them is something entirely different. Maybe that is what makes proverbs so fascinating, because the knowledge of proverb acquisition and application are totally different things, right? So they are not simply quotations to be memorized. So don't see proverbs as this is something I have to memorize. They are ways of thinking, they are ways of seeing the world. And that is exactly why they occupy such an important place in African literature. In part two of this series, I would want us to look at African literature from Things Fall Apart to Era of God, even to Soyinka's Death and the King's Horseman, and other African literature, to see how African writers use proverbs, not merely as beautiful sayings, but to build character, to also negotiate power, to preserve our cultures, and shape the rhythm of everyday conversation. I'll see you in part two of this series.